I've been at Clemson. It's my 20th season, so I've been in 19 of these Clemson Florida State games. So I don't like how we finished defensively. That was obviously a mess, but I have a great appreciation for winning, especially against this group. I've been down here when there's been not a lot of hope on on our sideline. Where it's about 700 on the scoreboard. So just thankful for the win. A lot of good things in the game.
And we're back with TigerNet Podcast. I'm your host, Matt, and I'm here with David Hood. David, how was the trip to Tallahassee?
The best thing, I started out last week talking about the trip to Boston and how it's always about eating and things like that. So for Tallahassee, the place we always stay has a Whataburger in the parking lot because we stay in Thomasville, Georgia. So I got Whataburger at 2:30 in the morning after we got back from the stadium. Honey baked ham box in the press box at Florida State. But, we were walking into the stadium. First of all, I'm kind of funny. My wife, Nikki, she laughs at me because if a game kicks off at, let's say 7:30, I kind of want to be there around 4:30 at the latest. And, other people are like, why would you ever get there that early? And so I was kind of fussing. I was like, hey, you kind of need to be there. 7:30 game, maybe a late arriving crowd. Who knows what's going to happen? And we drive in and there was no traffic. I mean, just none. And we rolled right into the media parking space at like 4:17 or something crazy, and pick up the credentials. And we're walking in, and so they let the media park in a really nice parking garage. And it's not a terrible walk. You walk around the soccer stadium and around the softball stadium, and then you kind of wind up in one end zone of Doak Campbell, but you got to go around to the side to get up to the press box. So not a terrible walk, but we're walking in, and I'm used to seeing these lots filled up with tailgaters. I'm used to seeing Florida State, have just unbelievable crowds, people dressed up, people decked out. And there was just none of it. I mean, just odd, just weird. And then, we get into the stadium, and I took a picture with about 30 minutes before kickoff, and there still wasn't anybody in the stands. And then, you look at kickoff, and it's pretty full. And I guess everybody just showed up late, but it was just a different environment than we're used to down at Florida State. Even with Chief Osceola and Renegade, which is always a big, part of Florida State, just didn't seem like it was like it used to be. So, I'm really hopeful that at some point Florida State can get back to being Florida State that, we're used to.
That's funny about tailgaters, because one thing I've always noticed is that even when a team's bad, and Florida State isn't a bad team, but they've had a couple of rough losses, about three in a row now. But even when a team's on a downward spiral, people will come tailgate. They may not go to the game, but I mean, when I lived in Columbia, the tailgating lots around Williams-Brice were always full. Stadium may not have been. So that's interesting that they're not even, going out to have a good time, especially ahead of a big game.
Yeah, I mean, this is the South. People are going to look for an excuse to drink, right? To drink and eat some chicken wings or a low country boil or something. But yeah, it just didn't seem like it was normal for me. I'm used to people trying to talk junk to other people when we're walking into the stadium. Just none of that. It just didn't kind of have that big game feel.
That's disappointing. That really is, because that was one of, admittedly in the ACC, there's not a lot of football schools and places that have that big time atmosphere. And Clemson and FSU really kind of used to lead the pack in that. And it sounds like they've taken a step back.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to me to see what happens with this Florida State team, this Florida State program going forward. I think everybody kind of understands that Norvell, probably needs a little extra time. I know that there are always those very vocal voices in a fan base that, Notre Dame's ready to fire Marcus Freeman, and he's been the head coach for 6 or 7 games or whatever. So nobody gives anybody any time anymore. And, understanding that Mike Norvell's had a few years now, and, Sanders continues to win more where he is, I think the voices to kind of bring Deion home will be louder. I'm kind of anxious to see how Florida State ends this season, and then see what happens with Mike Norvell at the end. My guess is that cooler heads will prevail, and he'll be given a shot next year to try and this will be his recruiting classes for the most part, and to try and turn it around. But we'll see. Should be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting in college football. We've really gotten to a point that schools are not letting guys have time. I mean, it's very much a show me now or don't. I mean, as we saw it in Georgia Tech. I mean, Jeff Collins got 3 years and some change, and was gone. And I feel like in the older days, you used to would put up with a little bit of mediocre results for a few years until you let a guy kind of build his program, and it's just not happening anymore. It's a very much a show me results now. And yeah, I mean, when you've got a guy like Deion Sanders, who's an alum of the program, who's doing things at Jackson State that no one's really ever done at that level of football. He beats out Florida State for the #1 recruit in the nation. I mean, yeah, obviously that name's going to come up a lot.
And considering how it is today with people not getting a lot of time, think about Dabo Sweeney's situation. He's named an interim coach in 2008 with pretty good results, but it might have been 4-3 or something like that with the loss in the Gator Bowl. Then still 3 or 4 losses in 2009, loses the ACC championship game, goes to a bowl game, beats Kentucky. And then you come back in 2010 and it's 6-7, and kind of a really miserable season in so many ways. The offense is bad. The defense has issues at times. You lose to South Florida, something that's just kind of incomprehensible, in a bowl game that nobody wanted to go to or nobody wanted to attend. Would he survive today? I have friends that I remind all the time when they ask about Dabo. I remind them that they texted me nonstop back in those days wanting him fired. They did not want him around their program, touching the program. They were ready to come and move him out of Clemson. And I wonder in today's social media world, as much larger as it is now, would Dabo survive?
Well, and I remember part of the early Dabo contract was that he was getting paid fairly low for a head coach, and that was kind of the idea. After Tommy Bowden had that big buyout, it was like, okay, we'll let Dabo take a shot at it. We're not going to throw a lot of money into him, and if it doesn't work out, we can cut loose, no issue. So yeah, I think it would be harder for him to survive. And I laugh to this day because there are a lot of people, even after 2008, after winning the 4 games that was impressive, they didn't want Dabo to be hired, and they wanted Will Muschamp to be the head coach.
Or it was Will Muschamp, Mike Leach, Bill Cowher, Lane Kiffin. Those were some of the names that were rolling around. And then, here's something a lot of people know, a lot of people maybe don't know. Do you know who threw their name in the hat that year to become the head coach and came here and interviewed but didn't get the job? A guy by the name of Brent Venables.
Wow, I did not know that story.
Yeah, Brent Venables came here, and apparently strong consideration was given to the young Mr. Venables to become Clemson's head coach. And obviously he comes back a couple of years later and goes to work for Dabo Sweeney, and now he's the head coach at Oklahoma. So, but I even had people as late as 2012 and 13 who still wanted Dabo fired, because if you remember, following, in 2013, still lost to Florida State, still lost a game to South Carolina. And people were like, oh, it can't beat Florida State, can't beat the rivals, can't beat South Carolina. He can beat everybody else. We need to get rid of this guy. And then, of course, there was the, 4th and 16, you beat LSU and all that, and things kind of changed. And now everybody realizes that it was best that he stayed. But yeah, it's kind of funny how you think about what might have happened if Terry Don Phillips had been a little quicker on a trigger.
Absolutely. And that was something, I made the point to people this week. The fact that Clemson and Dabo have beaten FSU 7 times in a row is outstanding, because FSU was, as you said, was one of the teams that, even as late as 2012 and 2013 kind of had people questioning Dabo because he didn't have success with them. Again, that they were always that. Clemson was beating everybody else except FSU and Carolina. So the fact that Clemson has now been able to be this dominant, I know FSU is not what they were, but this is really an impressive run.
It really is. And somebody sent me an email a little bit ago. Dabo talked about this being kind of a once in an 81-year deal for this game Saturday in Death Valley. It's the first time that two teams with records greater than 6-0 have ever met in the history of Death Valley. Of course, Syracuse 6-0, Clemson is 7-0. And somebody said, didn't we have this back in 2013 with Clemson and Florida State? And the answer to that is no. Clemson was 6-0. Florida State was 5-0. And of course, Clemson wore the big L after that game. And I go back, and I love to talk to Taj Boyd about this, but the big storyline in that 2013 Clemson FSU game was, it's the freshman Jameis Winston against the veteran Taj Boyd, and would the veteran win out? And that's what I thought. I thought freshman quarterback coming in to Death Valley, and not used to this atmosphere against the guy who's been around the block a lot, a senior in Taj Boyd. Thought Clemson had it, and we go down to the field pregame, and I go down to where Florida State is warming up, and I see Jameis Winston, and he's waving to girls in the stands. He's dancing. He's trying to flirt with Erin Andrews, the sideline reporter for ESPN. He's trying to get her attention. He's cracking jokes and acts like he has not a care in the world. And I watch and I laugh, and I see some of Clemson players come out of the tunnel, and you see the wide eyes and the here we go. And Nikki turned to me and she said, "This one's already over." She said, it's already over. Florida State's won this one. And sure enough, 51-13 or 51-14 or whatever it was bad. And to think that, what a stretch it's been since then. It's incredible.
And yeah, that's wild. And that, you had guys like Jameis that nothing fazed them. The lights were never too big. And we've now gotten where Clemson is that way. I mean, I don't know that we have guys, flirting with girls in the stands, but we're at a point that there's, an 8 o'clock game in Tallahassee used to would have been the biggest thing in the world for Clemson football. Now, most of these guys have been to the playoffs. They've been on the biggest stage. It's just not, the team is very much used to being under the lights, and they perform well with it.
I get tickled. I love message boards. I don't know why. I don't participate in them except ours at TigerNet. But I love to go read it because you can get some of the greatest responses in the world. And, I go briefly onto a Florida State message board Sunday on our drive home. And it was, I am so sick of Clemson. I am so sick of losing to them. One of them was like, F Clemson, Dabo Sweeney, and Will Shipley need to go somewhere and die. And I thought, how things have really turned when Florida State, we're just sick of losing to Clemson. And it really is incredible with all that run that they had. And man, I loved going to Florida State, loved listening to Gene Deckerhoff, longtime voice of the Seminoles. Of course, Bobby Bowden, always there. One of my favorite places to go and see a game. And so, yeah, it's kind of neat to look back and think how things are different and some of the streaks that Clemson has against the teams in the ACC, 14 or 15 straight against Wake Forest. Louisville has never beaten Clemson, 7 straight against FSU. Miami had one since 2004. Virginia Tech, all the meetings since 2009 or 10 or whenever it was. Clemson has not lost to them. Some incredible runs that Clemson is on right now.
Absolutely. We'll pivot, talk a little bit about the game because, it started out FSU and Clemson were trading haymakers, and then that middle 8, what everybody's talked about, Clemson was dominant there. had some great defensive plays set up and you go into halftime up 10 and you felt really good with that.
Yeah, that middle eight, for people that don't know what we're talking about, that is the last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 of the second half. And Coach Sweeney talked about that today. He was talking about back in his day, it was the middle 10, really. It was the last 5 of the first half and the first 5 of the second half. So Clemson wins that, and there were some big plays in there too that kind of changed things around. There was a big fumble and kind of a quick maybe you could call it a 10 or a 14 point swing there right before the half, and then Clemson comes out and hits Davis Allen on the big touchdown, and you think, okay, this one is getting ready to get ugly, and then it didn't. And to me, even though the coaches have kind of poo-pooed it and said, no, we didn't do it, I thought that it was another case of taking the foot off the gas a little bit. And next thing you know, it's a ball game down in Tallahassee. It's a ball game.
It reminded me a lot of the 2015 Notre Dame game, where you pretty much were dominating for what felt like the whole game, and then just offense kind of sputters, a couple of quick scores for Notre Dame, and they're right back in it. Obviously, that one went to overtime. And yeah, I mean, I know the coaches have said, that they weren't taking the foot off the gas pedal, but definitely felt like there was a little bit less urgency when Clemson was up 20. And kind of a thing, I think we've seen it a couple of times. It was kind of like the Boston College game, where Clemson, they're up and then they bring in Cade Klubnik for the Wildcat package, and it kind of backfires. And it's just it seems like Clemson is pulling up a little bit when they get a lead, and you kind of wish that they would take a little bit more of a lead before kind of messing around with those kind of things.
Yeah, and I actually tweeted this during the game that I kind of ascribe to the Steve Spurrier school of thought, in that even if I'm up 35-0 in the second quarter, I'm still throwing haymakers and I'm still throwing bombs, and I'm going to score as many points as possible, because it is college football, and you want to keep that attacking mindset. And Brandon Streeter went into a little bit of it yesterday, talking about the one drive where they had 11 plays, but they were really just trying to milk clock and run the football, and they ran it 10 of 11 plays. And I even made him laugh a little bit. I said, yes, except the middle, 4 to the right, 1 pass play. It was incomplete. Like, I know what's going on. And, for him, that's not going conservative. It's more about the 4-minute offense and kind of milking the clock. And to me, I just don't like that. I remember one time listening to, Mike Leach, and he was talking about, I think it was the prevent defense. I don't like the prevent defense either, because you have a team who's played really well on defense all game, doing what they do, and then they get on the last drive and they start playing soft and giving up 25 yards a shot, and they wind up losing. To me, the prevent defense only prevents one thing: it prevents you from winning. That's just my way. And to me, I'm out there going, you still run your up-tempo offense, you still go for the jugular, you don't slow it down. And I know that's maybe not what the analytics say. I know maybe the analytics are, 4th and 1, you're going to punt and you're going to do this. I tell you what, you look at Ohio State, they don't take the foot off the gas for anybody. And that's one of the reasons that even though they don't have a great schedule, people think they're one of the best teams in the country, is just because they do. They go for it. And when they feel like somebody's neck is about to snap, they just go ahead and step on it the rest of the way and snap it.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. And definitely. And I think another thing, just, as DJ still grows as a quarterback, you kind of want to continue with the up tempo, not just for, snapping their neck, but also just to kind of keep him in rhythm, get him a little more work, just so that he can continue to stay consistent. Because you don't want him to go cold at some point during this year. And he's still is a young guy. And honestly, I mean, quite frankly, 2 weeks ago, I was sitting here saying we need to really start looking at him getting the invite to New York and put up some gaudy numbers, help him get a Heisman invitation.
Yeah, to me, it really is all about rhythm. You saw that Dabo maybe angered Jeff Hafley a little bit against Boston College by late in the game. Here we go, late in the game, running a kind of a quick tempo offense and scoring that last touchdown. And to me, that should just be the way that you go all the time. Of course, again, I always say this with the caveat: I fussed about Brian Snitker this week in the Atlanta Braves. I fuss about his handling of a bullpen all the time. But I have never been paid to manage in a World Series game, nor have I ever won one. So Brian Snitker gets the tiebreaker on decision making with me. And again, I've never won a national championship as a head coach. I've never won any kind of a national championship, in fact, except in softball. So there you go. So you say that, but to me, yeah, I would like to keep the foot on the gas and just get these guys going. And to me, it was kind of a weird game because only three passes went to receivers, two of those to Antonio Williams, one to maybe it was Ngata. Bo Collins didn't have a catch. Just this really kind of a weird offensive game. It was more about feeding Will Shipley than anything else. And, they're going to need that rhythm this week because Syracuse is going to be tough.
And this is a great way for me to throw in our sponsor, Prize Picks. Remember, Prize Picks, if you use that code Tigers, TIGERS 100, that you will get up to $100 matched on your initial deposit. But last week when we had Ingram on here, one of the guys he mentioned thinking would have a big game looking at the Prize Picks projections was Will Shipley running and receiving. And I made the comment, I said, Clemson has not really gotten Will involved in the passing game as much this year. He's really been the running workhorse. And of course, Brandon Streeter proves me wrong and decides to throw to him a lot. And he had a great game. I don't know if Coach Streeter listens to this podcast, but
I'm thinking he probably doesn't.
I kind of, when I was watching, I was like, did I tick him off or something? So he threw. So Shipley was a lot more used in the passing game this week, and it really was effective.
Yeah, 6 receptions for 48 yards. He had the 69-yard kick return, 238 all-purpose yards because he had all of the rushing yards. And he came into interviews today to kind of talk about it, and we can get into that later if we need to. But I really wish too they would get film off of the ball a little bit more. But again, just kind of one of those games where they decided after not getting Shipley involved up at Boston College and that was going to be more of a wide receivers game. Clemson's offense just kind of taking what the defense gives them, and they realized that they were going to have success getting out on the edge, out on the perimeter against Florida State rather than going up the middle, and that's exactly what they did.
Absolutely, and that was certainly fun to see. Another thing that was extremely fun was to see Brandon Streeter break out the flea flicker play, because it's not something we've seen Clemson do in the past few years, and that was an amazingly drawn up play.
It's a lot of fun when you get to see new stuff. And he was talking about them practicing it for weeks, and now they can kind of stop practicing it. They've used it, might see it again at some point. And it's interesting to see the evolution of this Brandon Streeter, and I will even say Kyle Richardson offense. I think we're seeing a lot of Kyle Richardson's fingerprints all over this. Of course, he's the tight ends coach, but he's also the passing game coordinator. I think we're seeing a lot of Kyle Richardson's influence in the offense, and I think we'll continue to see more of it going forward. And then again, a little bit different challenge with Syracuse this week than Florida State. Different type of game plan, going to kind of be fun to see how they get everybody involved, and I'm looking forward to it. And Dabo has already said about this week, hey, grab a biscuit and tape your ankles and get here early. So a noon game in the Valley should be fun.
And when Coach said that, my immediate thought was, is this going to turn into the 2015 pizza party where all of a sudden they take a comment Dabo says and they're having to give out biscuits at Death Valley? I don't know if that's going to happen this weekend, but I'm sure that there will be a lot of people who will definitely make sure they have their biscuit ready to go.
Well, I tell you what, and this is probably a good time. We've actually got a new sponsor for me and the TigerNet podcast, which is Chick-fil-A of Clemson and Seneca. Herb Tyler and his crew do a great job. And my son will actually be working there Saturday. So make sure you hit one of those 2 Chick-fil-A's. I appreciate their sponsorship. I think they're going to be a great sponsor. They'll have the biscuits ready for you. What they will not be able to do is tape your ankles.
You have to do that one yourself, but yeah, Chick-fil-A always a great way to start off game day. I mean, this is just always was one of my go-tos in college. And you get up, you grab it, you go watch game day, and you get ready for your game. And so that's exciting to have them partner with us.
Yeah, and then we're also still excited about Prize Picks, and hey, this is going to be an interesting weekend for Prize Picks too. There's a lot of really good games going on out there. In fact, let's go back to Florida State for a minute. We talk about Prize Picks and who can pick what. Vegas with the early 7.5 or whatever 7-point line it was against Clemson Florida State. Then it dropped into that 3 and a 3.5 range, and we hear, well, it was because a respected bettor put a whole lot of money on Florida State, so maybe Vegas rethought it. And I can remember when Clemson went up 34-14, I was like, hey, Vegas isn't always right. This isn't going to be a 3 to 6 point game. And then lo and behold, it's a 6-point game at the end. And I think that's when we've got a sponsor like Prize Picks. If you think you're good at this type of stuff and you think you know what you're doing with the picks, it's a great way to test yourself. And another one of our writers, he was laughing up in the press box because we were talking about that. And he said, if I ever, quit sports writing and I had a lot of money, he said, I would either be the richest guy on the planet or I'd be dead broke because I'd be betting every weekend.
Yeah. And college football is such a fun thing to do those kind of things, either with Vegas or with Prize Picks, stuff like that, because there's so much going on, and you either think you know it or you're completely off.
And I like to think that I know it, and I don't. It's just always off for me. We have on the TigerNet board, we have kind of a membership deal where people can go in and make their picks every week, and I typically am at the lower end of the scale because I'm always trying to pick. I go for the upsets. I'm like, oh yeah, can Penn State beat Michigan? No, they can't beat Michigan. But I always just do something just kind of goofy, crazy, and it's probably a good thing that I don't put a lot of money on stuff.
Starts internally. Those guys have to kill their instinct and just be internally motivated. There's only so much screaming and punching stuff that you can do as a coach. Ultimately they got to go out there and perform, and I got to put them in situations to be successful as well.
This podcast is a production of Big Game College Football Network. For more information, please go to bgpodcastnetwork.com. For 24-hour streaming of all Big Game College Football Network podcasts, please go to biggamecfb.airtime.pro. All rights reserved.
Man, they've been asleep. What you talking about? Online.